In today's new episode of Missing, we speak with old friend Nina Innsted about the disappearance of Paige Renkoski from May 24th, 1990. Lance, what'd you think of this conversation?
I always love having old friends come back on with these cases and these stories that they feel super passionate about. And Paige's story is really one that can frustrate you endlessly. And you can just tell how much Nina is into this story. She's so detailed, she's so articulate, and gives us such a great breakdown of the circumstances of Paige's disappearance and all of the events leading up to it and after it. And there's really no one better, in my opinion, to be talking about something like this in such detail and such clarity and length.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nina hosts the Already Gone podcast, which mostly covers cases from Michigan. And Paige Renkoski went missing from Fowlerville, Michigan. So this one is certainly a case that Nina is very familiar with. And you can check out everything that Nina is doing at Already Gone at alreadygonepodcast.com.
And if anybody has any information on Paige Renkowski's disappearance, you're instructed to call the Livingston County, Michigan's Sheriff's Department at 517-540-7880.
Okay, we're going to break quick for commercial, and we'll be right back with Nina Innsted. Welcome back to the podcast. Old friend Nina. How's it going, Nina?
It's going well. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're so glad to have you back. And it's been so long. Like, what took so long to get you back on? I feel like...
It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. I feel like it's something that needs to be developed into a 6-part podcast series.
At least 6 parts.
At least. But for those who are unfamiliar, there's probably, a small handful. Can you refresh the listeners' memories, introduce yourself, a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name is Nina. I host the Already Gone podcast, but you may have heard me on Up and Vanished or They Walk Among America. I am also a credentialed victims advocate working with the Missing in Michigan organization since 2018. And today I'm excited to talk about Paige Renkoski.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit about your show before we dive into Paige's story?
Sure.
Yeah, what kind of cases do you cover?
Well, Already Gone has been around since 2016, and I cover cases from Michigan and the Great Lakes region. I'm a Michigan native, and I love talking about cases from my home state. I also work with many families in the community and help them get their cases elevated and out there so that people don't forget about their missing loved one.
When did you discover that this was something that you were passionate about and you wanted to take it to, the broadcast level and then to the next level of being a licensed advocate, working with families? Was that just like a natural calling that snuck up on you?
Yes. My daughter developed, she's fine now, I'll preface it with that, but my daughter developed agoraphobia, and I had to leave my job as a classroom teacher to stay home with her. And while I was home with her, I was going a little crazy just being home with a child all day. And I started listening to podcasts in my spare time just to keep my brain active. And one day I mentioned to my husband that, hey, maybe I should start a podcast. And he came home from work that day with a microphone that he'd bought at Best Buy and was like, you should. And that was in 2016.
That's awesome. So your husband is the one responsible for the trajectory of your current life path, which is that one microphone, which is so cool.
Well, and also, and I'm showing my age here, when I was a little girl, there was an active serial killer in the Detroit area called the Oakland County Child Killer. And if you're familiar with that case, you know it is still unsolved. The Oakland County Child Killer murdered a little girl in my neighborhood. So when I started kindergarten, I was going to the school that this girl had gone to, and there was a memorial to her in the lobby of the school that I had to walk by every day. So it really embedded itself. And with that case still being unsolved, I did a long form series actually about the Oakland County child killings called Don't Talk to Strangers. And I still am in communication with the families of some of the Oakland County child killer victims and then some other children that were murdered or vanished during that time period, including Jane Allen and Kim King. So it's just sort of stuck with me. And I wanted to better serve these families and make sure that I wasn't just sort of running around not knowing what to do or the proper thing to do. And I ended up pursuing a certification as a credentialed advocate so that I could better serve these families and make sure that I was doing my best work on their behalf.
Very cool. Wow. Well, yeah. Can you tell us a bit about this case that we're going to speak about today? Who is Paige Renkoski?
So in Michigan, we have one of the most famous missing person cases in the country, and that's Jimmy Hoffa. And that happened in 1975. Everybody knows about Jimmy Hoffa. But if you want to know the second most famous case in Michigan, it's the disappearance of Paige Renkoski, which happened 15 years later on May 24th of 1990. Paige was a 30-year-old school teacher. She was engaged. You know, we look at missing persons and we try and go through their background to look for clues as to why they vanished or why they went missing. And there's really nothing mysterious in Paige's background. She was a happy, well-loved, financially stable woman who was living her best life and vanished mysteriously from the side of a freeway in 1990.
So can you go into a little bit of her family life? You said that she was well loved and she was 30, right? So
Yes.
A lot of times we cover cases where it's individuals who are just like graduating college or they're in college, and some of the circumstances can be lined up where you can think, well, maybe they had too much to drink at a college party and wandered into an area where maybe they drowned or something like that. But at 30, that's where you're kind of getting your feet under you. You know,
Yes.
You're figuring out who you are. Can you lead us up to that?
Sure.
Yeah.
Paige was one of 4 girls. Her parents, Artis and Carl, raised their family in the Okemos area. Okemos is just outside of Lansing, the state capital. They were a Spartans family, Michigan State University. Paige was a student there. She met her fiance, Steve, at a Michigan State University Spartans hockey game. On the day that she disappeared, she was driving her mother, Artis's car, and this is important. She's driving her mother's car and her mother down to Detroit Metropolitan Airport, which is just outside of Detroit. It's about 60 miles, give or take, from Okemos, where she lived, but it's all freeway, very direct route. And she dropped her mom at the airport that morning, and her mom said everything seemed fine and normal, and Paige was happy. Paige's fiance was playing in a softball game that afternoon, and Paige was going to go see him play. Then they were going to go out for dinner with the team, have a couple beers. She had a nice evening plan. She had a nice weekend plan. May 24th was the Thursday before Memorial Day. And in Michigan, Memorial Day is what kicks off summer. So everybody's kind of got this happy, good spirits, ready for the good weather to come to Michigan. And she just had a nice day planned. She dropped her mom at the airport. Everything went fine. And then she went to Canton, which is a Detroit suburb, a few miles from the airport, not far, and met with her girlfriend in Canton. And her girlfriend had a couple of young children, so they went to a local park. And this is important because this park is going to come up again later when we talk about a suspect in Paige's case. They go to the park, they get ice cream. She says goodbye to her friend. She gets in the car, drives down Ford Road, stops at a party store. For those of you not from Michigan, a party store is a convenience store or a package store or a bodega. They sell cigarettes, they sell lottery, they sell beer, they sell soda, they sell snacks. Stops at the party store, buys a 40-ouncer of beer. And as she's checking out with her 40-ounce of beer, the cashier compliments her on this necklace that she's wearing. And if you've seen photos of Paige, you've probably seen her wearing a white t-shirt, a necklace, and these sort of satiny looking pants with a print. That's what she was wearing the day she vanished. And that's also very unusual. You usually don't get to see exactly what someone was wearing when they went missing. So the cashier compliments her. They exchange pleasantries. Paige gets in the car and she does something controversial. She had an empty soda cup in her car and poured about half of the beer into the soda cup, puts her car in gear, gets on the freeway, starts heading home.
You said it's controversial, but again, like, that's no whatever. We've had stories like that, right? Where someone's, you know, and people make mistakes and they make bad decisions. And as far as, you know, bad decisions go, that's, you know, I'm not trying to condone it, but I'm also not putting it out there to be like, well, it caused any sort of reason for her to disappear, right?
Right.
Yeah.
There was plenty of beer left when her car was found, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
She does stop at a rest area, and I believe that rest area is now gone. But she stopped at a rest area, and a woman saw her have a verbal exchange with a man at the rest area. The verbal exchange does not seem concerning. It doesn't seem antagonistic. It's, you know, could have been nice weather we're having. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. But she does see Paige have an exchange with a gentleman at the rest area. Paige gets in her car. She goes north on 275, picks up I-96 west, and she's headed to home. But she doesn't make it home. She pulls her car, her mother's car, a silver Cutlass Calais, off to the side of the freeway with the engine running, with her shoes off, with the roadie in the cup holder next to her, with her purse on the seat, and she gets out of the car. And we don't know why. There's nothing wrong with the car. It was left running. There's no damage to the car, so it's unlikely that someone bumped her. Now, I talked about her parents, Carl and Artis. Carl was a police officer for many years. He was a member of the Michigan State University Police Force before he took a job with the state of Michigan. All four of their girls were raised with a healthy respect for law enforcement. So my thinking is that someone driving alongside Paige pulled out a badge and pointed for her to pull over.
Yeah, my first thought when hearing that was the scene in Zodiac, the movie where the guy tells her that her tire looks like it's loose or whatever, and makes her pull over, the woman with the baby. So that's where my thought went, was that somebody, you know, if it's a badge or if someone's trying to be a good Samaritan, because why else would your car still be running if you didn't think that you were going to be there for too long?
Right. And her shoes. She didn't even put her shoes on, but she got out of the car on the side of the freeway. Now, the location where her car is left is interesting because it's 200 to 300 yards from an exit. She could have pulled, if it was like she saw somebody she knew who was like, oh, hey, pull over, she would have gone to the exit. So why did she stop so close to safety?
Was that exit where she was headed?
No, that was not her exit. It was the Fowlerville exit.
Okay.
So she was still a few miles from home.
Were there any witnesses to her pulling over on the side of the road or seeing her on the side of the highway?
So there are a couple of reports, and we have to keep in mind that people, one, it's like 3:30-ish on a Thursday. This is a semi-rural area in 1990, so it's not like she was in the middle of Detroit or a highly populated area. And people are flying by at 60, 70 miles an hour. There were 3 different reports. One involves a blue car. Someone said they saw a blue car near Paige's car. Someone else said they saw a man and that he was in front of Paige's car like this with his hand out, which to me, you're doing this, you're showing somebody a badge. That's how they badge you, is they put their hand out like that. The third report is of a burgundy minivan with non-white individuals inside the van, more than one person. Now, the blue car was, people said, yeah, I think I saw a blue car near hers. The badge, the man in front of her car with his hand out, was seen and reported by an off-duty police officer who was traveling the other way on the freeway, and that he looked across the freeway and saw this happen. The burgundy minivan was reported by a couple of different people. There was also talk that a non-white individual had Paige by the elbow and was sort of steering her. Now, we have 3 completely conflicting reports here, and all of them make sense, but none of them really make sense.
These reports that are coming from 3 different individuals, how do those reports come in? Did they go directly to the police, or was this something that, they told the media? Like, is it from the police reports, I guess is my question?
I believe these are tips and leads that came into law enforcement in the days and weeks following Paige's disappearance.
Gotcha.
The burgundy minivan lead is the one that was the most followed up on. And I know from speaking with the Livingston County Sheriff's Department, who I have to give props to, we hear really frustrating things about law enforcement in these older cases. They have been amazing in Paige's case, and they've been consistently amazing for 35 years. They have really worked her case and followed up on leads. I'm writing a book and I'm including Paige's case in the book. And they were like, what can we give you? How can we help you with Paige's case? They were super generous and open-handed, and they deserve props for that. They've been great about her case. But the burgundy minivan lead is the one that they followed up on the most, including interviewing people that are in custody. Some of those people have since passed away.
Boy, that is great to hear about the law enforcement involvement and their diligence in investigating this, because for whatever reason, we always hear that it just kind of dropped by the wayside.
Yes, we hear that a lot.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
The verbal exchange that Paige had before she went missing, has that been confused with the sighting of her at the car before she goes missing, like right before she goes missing?
So she had a verbal exchange with someone at a rest area, and someone else saw the exchange at the rest area, but it seemed really innocuous. It did not seem concerning, and it did not appear that the man followed Paige, but she did have a verbal exchange with someone. And if it's the rest area that I'm thinking of, it was on 275 several miles before her car was pulled over, like 20 miles before her car was pulled over. So if that man is the same person that abducted Paige, he would have had to have followed her for quite a distance.
And a different highway too, right?
And from 275 to I-96. So quite a ways.
So then there was never anything in the description of that person who she was talking to that connected a description from an eyewitness account later?
No.
Okay, good.
But we talked about the blue car, and that the blue car was one of the things reported. If you look online, you can see pictures of Paige's car exactly the way the police found it. You can see her little white shoes, you can see her purse, you can see the roadie. It's all left in her car. And you can also see the car itself, which was a gray Cutlass Calais. But some people, if they looked at her car, might describe it as light blue, which has me wondering if people confused her car with a car at the scene. But late last year, police had a break in another case, the 1989 murder of Beverly Wyel from Canton. We've talked about Canton. That's where Paige was with her girlfriend. And they arrested 69-year-old Buster John Robbins. In 1989, Buster John Robbins was an auxiliary police officer in Macomb County, which is just outside of Detroit. He drove a blue car. So he would have had both a blue vehicle and a badge. So it's my understanding that they've been looking at him quite a bit in Paige's case. Obviously, he's being pursued for the murder of Beverly Wyel. He claims that he had consensual sex with Beverly, and someone else came along and shot her and left her for dead in her vehicle. But his wife, who's been married to him since 1974, is divorcing him, and I believe that CSM was found on his home computer. So this is not a good person. This is somebody that needs to be looked at both in Beverly's case and in Paige's case. So there's consideration that he could be the one that badged her.
Yeah. Was there consideration about Buster Robbins before he was arrested in Beverly's case?
No, he came up as, my understanding is it was a cold DNA hit in Beverly's case. And it was obtained through genetic genealogy that the connection was made to him.
And that just came about, you said, last year?
Late last year.
Wow.
So he had a court hearing in March. He had a court hearing in May. And Paige disappeared 8 months after Beverly Wyel was murdered. So Beverly left behind a 12-year-old son who is really excited to see some movement in his mother's case.
Oh, well, that's great. And Beverly was shot, I take it?
Yes.
And there was no attempt to hide Beverly's body? Her body
No.
was found in the car?
I believe that her body was found near her car. She had dropped her son off at work. She was in the middle of a divorce, which complicated her case because, of course, law enforcement looks at the soon-to-be ex-husband, who was not the father of her son, but she was living with her parents. She had dropped her son off at school and then had pulled into a park to take a nap, which seems odd to me, but I was not a single mom in 1989. I don't know what she was going through. She was assaulted in the park. And my understanding is, but don't quote me on this, that the park where Beverly was murdered is the same park that Paige went to with her girlfriend.
Okay. I mean,
So
yeah.
lots of potential connections between the two cases.
And what was Paige's relationship with her significant other?
She was engaged to Steve. They had a very happy relationship. And actually, Steve was playing softball that afternoon. So he's playing softball and he's sort of looking in the stands between plays because Paige is supposed to show up and she doesn't show up. And it's 1990, so nobody has a cell phone. So it's not like he can call her and say, "Where are you?" He, after the game, goes to her house where she was staying with her mother, and lets himself in and sees that there's a message on the answering machine at Artis's home. And the message is from the Livingston County Sheriff saying, "Hey, we found your car on the side of the freeway. You need to move it." And he calls the sheriff's department and says, "Wait a minute, my fiance was driving that car and she's missing. I can't find her." Unfortunately, they did some stuff to Paige's car before it was tagged as being a potential crime scene. So I believe it was towed, but then because it was found running on the side of the freeway with her purse and her shoes.
Was it locked?
That I don't know.
And her purse and her shoes. So wallet and all personal items.
Yes. And Paige did leave behind credit cards. She had some money in her bank account. None of it has ever been touched.
So was this ever investigated as a runaway situation?
Yes, but there's no reason for Paige to run away. She was engaged. She had a nice job. She got along well with her parents and her sisters. There was no conflict or stress really, aside from the normal that we all have. She didn't have anything stressful going on in her life.
Sorry if you already answered this or if this is out there and I'm just not aware of it. When she stopped at a rest stop. Was that rest stop one with a gas station? Did she stop?
No.
Oh, okay, cool. So
yeah, Michigan rest stops are just comfort stations.
Just to take a rest. Okay.
Yeah, they have
Interesting.
bathrooms and drinking fountains and vending machines.
And what's the distance that she was driving from point A to point B? And how close was she?
So when she left the rest area, if it's the rest area I think she went to, which was on 275 in Westland, Westland's the next town up from Canton, then she would have traveled about 30 miles up to Fowlerville, so where her car was found. So it would have been quite a distance, which is why I tend to discount the man at the rest area as being involved, because he had her face to face at the rest area. Why follow her for 30 miles?
Exactly. If you're going to do something, it's going to be probably within the next 3 or 4 miles, I would imagine. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an abductor's mindset, so that's just what I would imagine. But did they process the car and take fingerprints, and later on did they do DNA or anything in the interior?
They did process the car. I can't speak to the types of tests that they did, but I know they did a thorough examination. I don't believe, based on the witness descriptions that we have, the eyewitness descriptions, that her abductor was ever in the car. I think Paige pulled over and exited the vehicle and then was intercepted. I don't think they came to the car. And I also would guess it's 1990. We're not wearing gloves. He had no reason, the deputy that tagged her car had no reason to suspect foul play. Car's running. I would guess that he opened the door and turned the car off. So if her abductor did try to open the door to get Paige out, it would have been obscured by the deputy.
And just your opinion, what does that say to you about somebody who abducts her, that they leave the car running?
I think it's very strange that Paige didn't turn off the vehicle. Was she hurried out of the car? Did they flash a gun at her? Why did she exit the car without her shoes on the side of a freeway and leave it running?
In the middle of the day.
Right, broad daylight, beautiful sunny day.
Yeah, that makes this story even like spookier, even more frightening. You are feeling a sense of security when you're doing anything on your own during the day, but at night that's a different story. You're sort of on edge, right? You see headlights or someone's following you. It just paints a much more sinister picture. But during the day, who's cruising for someone to abduct then?
So, one of my listeners came to me with a rather interesting theory. If you look at a picture of Paige Renkoski, and I don't know if you guys will know who Bill Lambier is.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sure do.
Okay. Bill Lambier was married to Chris Lambier. Chris Lambier and Paige Renkoski look like sisters. So somebody said, hey, maybe they thought they were getting Chris Lambier. I mean, it's as valid a theory as any that we have for this case, because I mean, if you told me that a UFO came and sucked her out of her car, maybe. Would not, it's such a strange case.
And Bill Lambert, just for some context, he played for the Detroit Pistons at that time,
Yes.
who were a very popular team.
In Michigan, right. So
in Michigan.
It wouldn't be so out of the ordinary to see Chris Lambier.
Right. On the freeway in an Oldsmobile.
She does look a lot like her.
She does. So you could see someone, especially someone who's maybe not the sharpest, going, oh, let's kidnap Chris Lambier for ransom. And then realizing they've got a school teacher from Okemos instead.
I know, but wouldn't you hear something about that later on? Because that would be such a spontaneous abduction. And then if they realize that they had the wrong person, these people aren't like murderers. If their spontaneous instinct was to abduct somebody famous for ransom, we got the wrong person. I mean, I don't know if they would let her go or not, but
it's a theory that somebody came up with, and I was really skeptical. And yeah, until I looked at the photos and was like, oh, okay, it's not completely far-fetched.
As far as the vehicle, we know that it was towed away without sort of being processed as a crime scene at that moment. Was there anything else about the way the car was left there that you're aware of that stood out?
That it was running and she left her shoes behind, I find incredibly bizarre. But the car did not have any damage. We've heard about the bump and runs where they'll bump your car to get you to pull over, and then it's fraud or they're trying to rob you. Car did not have any damage. And if you look at, I believe it was an 86 Cutlass Calais, I love General Motors, but it was kind of a plasticky car. It didn't have a firm steel bumper. It would have been damaged if somebody had bumped it. There would have been a crack or a dent, some sort of telltale sign that somebody had bumped her. And if somebody bumped her, why not pull off at the Fowlerville exit that's in eyesight? She could see Fowlerville exit from where she pulled off at the side of the road.
And what is on that exit, or what was there at that time?
Not much. There may have been a gas station. There may have been a fast food restaurant. Fowlerville, even today, I don't want to say it's rural, but it's sort of suburban rural now. But in 1990, it was more on the rural side. Right. Something else to mention, that I've heard brought up in her case, is if you are moving contraband between Detroit and Lansing, I-96 is how you're going to go. So if you are up to no good and moving, illegal things back and forth, you're going to be moving it along I-96. Something else to mention is that in that area, not so much now, but in the 90s maybe, there was Klan activity. So this was not a great area for minorities. So if you look at the eyewitness statement that there were non-white men in a burgundy minivan that may have taken Paige, that adds a layer of complexity or risk for them because it was such a concerning area at the time.
That's interesting. How far away did you say she was from the exit?
A couple 100 yards, maybe 300 yards. She could see it.
So I would feel, just as a commuter, if I saw police lights behind me, me personally, I would probably take that exit to get off the highway and find like the very first place to pull over, maybe put my hazards on so the police know that I'm, doing this. I'm only speaking from like my seat right here. I don't know, maybe I would pull over on the highway, but just seeing that exit, I would have felt like I just want to be kind of out of the way.
I don't know that that was as commonly thought of as the proper practice 35 years ago. Now, yeah, absolutely. You pull off the freeway, you pull, onto the exit ramp. But I don't know if someone badged her to get her to pull over, if she would have felt comfortable going that quarter mile to the exit itself.
Yeah, and I'm fully aware that I'm sitting here right now, the middle-aged guy who is hearing a story so far removed. I probably would have just pulled off to the side of the road. I probably would have saw the lights. Would have occurred to me that I have half a beer in an open container and,
right.
Just kind of losing my sense of what to do.
Right.
Yeah, that does seem to be more of a recent road trend, where if there's even a cop pulled over in the breakdown lane, they want people to go in the lane next to the lane right next to the breakdown lane, so creating a buffer. So there was no chance to really process the car for fingerprints or palm prints or anything like that?
I believe they did what they could. Livingston County has been on top of this case since the word go. So I think that they processed it as much as they were able to, knowing that it was towed, knowing that the officer interacted with it. But to my knowledge, they have not gotten any evidence to push the case forward from the vehicle. And the vehicle's really all they have.
Where is the vehicle now?
I believe it is still in storage at the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. And that was her mom's car that her mom had as a work vehicle. So it was not connected to Paige. It was like her mom had this job with this automotive supplier, and part of her compensation package was a lease of a Coles Cutlass.
Right. So it doesn't seem like the kind of situation where she was stalked, or at least any long-term kind of following or something like that. But it does seem clear that she was abducted from the scene, at least to me.
Yes.
But no eyewitness reported seeing any kind of struggle?
The only eyewitness report that may have reported a struggle was that somebody had Paige by the elbow and was leading her toward a burgundy minivan. But again, you've got people that are going by at 60, 70 miles an hour, and they're just getting a glimpse of what's going on.
Can you give us a little bit of the developments that happened in the investigation afterward and how you can compare them to more recent developments? Because I feel like this story in particular has things that have developed several years after the fact, including the DNA and everything. So is there sightings or anything that happened early on that has been connected to maybe something that's been developed or realized today?
So I remember when Paige disappeared, and it was a huge, huge news story. Normally, cases from the Lansing area would not get covered in Detroit, but because Paige just was last seen in Canton, and the clerk at the party store called in a tip and said, "Hey, I waited on her. I sold her a beer." It was heavily covered in the Detroit area. It was on the cover of the Detroit News and Free Press. So any tips that came in then, Livingston County Sheriff worked. And the Livingston County Sheriff has a very good track record in solving old cold cases. They solved the murder, I believe, from 1982 of Christina Castiglione. They followed that to the end and got it solved. Another case from the similar geographic area was the murder of Kim Loisel. I think that was 81, 82. Her case was solved. They had the same perpetrator in those two cases. They worked everything that they could work at the time, and they've kept it active. They've had billboards for Paige. They've really done everything that they could evidence-wise, but there is so little evidence in this case. Now, with the arrest of Buster Robbins and the geographic closeness and the time closeness, chronological closeness, they have really looked at him. I spoke with a friend who is retired law enforcement, and he went, I believe it's Buster Robbins. I think he did it. He had a badge. He had a blue car. He had the opportunity. It's the right time frame. So this person really believes that Buster Robbins, but looking at it from the perspective of Paige's family, I don't see anything definitive linking him to the case other than he drove a blue car and he had a badge. You know, so it's really hard to say if this is going to pan out. Something interesting about Paige is that when she was in her teens, she had a skateboarding accident and blew out one of her knees. So if she were to be found, she has a knee replacement and metal in one of her knees, which makes her a very distinctive set of remains.
Really, really interesting to note that. And I'm curious what any searches were like. Did they do any ground penetrating radar, and how often are searches conducted? Were there leads, in bodies of water or anything?
So one of the issues with her case is that there's no place to start a search from. There's no, they search the area around the freeway, but again, it's the side of a freeway in a rural area. There's, debris and cigarette butts. It was 1990, lots of junk on the road. They did do some searches based on conversations with the men that they believe were in the burgundy minivan. One of those men has since passed away. I believe one of those men, who was a child at the time, underage, is still incarcerated. But one of the things I've heard is that they feel like they've gotten all they can get out of these people, and that there's nothing more to follow up on, which is very frustrating.
Well, it's surprising to hear that they actually identified the people in the burgundy minivan. I guess I should have asked earlier. I kind of assumed that they just didn't.
I assume that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. So those people were questioned, obviously, about the case. Some maybe seems to have some criminal background. But are they considered suspects, or are they certainly still open to all leads and everything?
My understanding is that no one has ever been named a suspect in her case. Now, Detroit being Detroit and the birthplace of the automotive, we had a ton of burgundy minivans, but I believe they narrowed it down to a Mazda minivan. And that's how they were able to attach these people that had a criminal record to the burgundy minivan, to the geographic area where Paige disappeared from, and moved from there.
Wow. Good for them.
Yeah, like I said, Livingston County really worked this case.
How close was her disappearance to state borders and even to the Canadian border?
Not at all. Now, asking about the Canadian border is interesting because growing up in Detroit, we used to go to Canada for lunch. You'd pull up at the border, they'd ask you your citizenship, you'd say US, why are you going to Canada to have lunch? And they would just wave you through. It was a very casual setup. It is nothing like you see today. But she was quite far from the nearest border crossing. It would have either been the Blue Water Bridge in Sarnia or the crossing in Detroit with the bridge or the tunnel. Incredibly risky even then, because everybody gets looked at and everybody has to answer their citizenship. But we're talking 50, 60 miles. The Ohio border is similarly probably 50 miles from where she disappeared.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
And a thank you to our sponsors. Back to the program.
The folks in the burgundy minivan, do they have a history of violent crime?
That has not been shared with me. I believe there may have been drug-related crimes with violence attached. So drug-related crimes tend to come with violence, and I think that's who we're looking at. I believe that one of them died by violence. So you could say live by the sword, die by the sword. I don't know, because I don't know who the person was. So I can't look up who they were or what their crimes were.
Gotcha. Okay. But sounds more focused on drug mission and not instead of like out to find someone to kill, probably.
Right, right. And that's why I mentioned that the path between Detroit and Lansing runs right through where she was.
Were there any new or developing like construction projects that were going on right around that area? Anything that could be used as I hate saying it, but a place to dispose a body?
Absolutely. I think there were houses and subdivisions going up in that area. But again, if we believe it's the people in the burgundy minivan, this was an area with clan activity. This was not an area that they would want to hang out. So if it's the people in the burgundy minivan, they would have had to have transported her some distance. If it's Buster Robbins in his blue car with his badge, people aren't going to look twice at two people sitting in a blue car. You know what I mean? It depends on which theory you believe or you subscribe to.
So the circumstances of Beverly's murder, I guess, can you go into that a little bit more?
Okay, so Beverly Wyel was going through a divorce from her husband, who was not the father of her child. She was staying with her parents, and she had driven her child to school that day and then stopped at a park in Canton to have a nap. Someone intercepted her in the park, sexually assaulted her, shot her. I want to say they may have run her over with their vehicle when leaving the park, and her body was found. And of course, law enforcement focused on her soon-to-be ex-husband. Her case was cold until they had the DNA hit, which was received or obtained through genetic genealogy. They had to do the family tree to track down who the DNA at the scene belonged to. I do not know if the gun that Buster Robbins carried in the 90s or the 80s matched up to the weapon that was used to kill her. I don't know that information has been released, what caliber of weapon was used, but she was shot and left for dead in the park. We've all done this long time. We've seen a lot of cases. It's not a stretch for someone to go from leaving a body in a park to saying, you know what, I'm going to conceal this body so that they're not found. That's not an unusual progression for a criminal.
Right. And do we know any more about Buster as far as like, I don't know, was he a hunter does he live on like a lot of land or anything like that? And was his land searched?
So he lived up in Almont, which is in northern Macomb County. And he was Macomb County, worked for a Macomb County department as a reserve officer. I'm not sure which department that was. Almont is a rural area, even today. There's a little downtown, but it's very farmland. I'm sure there's some new houses going up there, but I can't speak to the type of residence he occupied there. He was married to his wife in 1974, and they are now going through a divorce because she left him when he was charged with murder in Beverly's case, which good for her. Wyel's crime scene also had her purse and shoes left behind in the car.
Oh, that's quite interesting. I would say that's very startlingly so.
Yes, and there was a blue car at the scene where she was at the park where her body was found. And there was also potentially a blue car at Paige's scene. So there's lots of circumstantial evidence linking the two cases.
Yeah. Also interesting to note that Buster's wife immediately seems to have filed for divorce. I take it this story snuck up on her.
That would be my guess. I believe they also found some inappropriate images on his computer, some illegal images. So that was one of the ways they used to hold him over until they could put the case together on Beverly. Because he tried to say, oh, it was consensual, we were having an affair, which, poor guy, how inconvenient.
The crazy story, though, like if that's true and he's having an affair with her and then someone just drives by, shoots her, and then he never mentions a word of it to anyone.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not believing that one.
No, not at all.
Were there any other cases or stories of cars that were found abandoned in the months, years, or in the same area that you have looked at and thought maybe this is yet another connection or potential connection?
So the only other case that I think could be connected to Paige's case is the 1990 disappearance of Connie Royce. Connie was in her 20s and she was out on a date with two guys at the Hayloft Bar in Mount Clemens. And for Michigan listeners, it's the Hayloft in Mount Clemens, not the Hayloft in Detroit. The Hayloft in Mount Clemens is now closed and has been demolished. But in 1990, the Hayloft had video surveillance of their entrance. So when you walked in and made checked in with the bouncer and showed your ID, it was videotaped. And when you walked out of the Hayloft, it was videotaped. And Connie Royce went out on a date with this guy who brought his buddy along. They did a little pre-gaming at the guy's apartment before they went to the Hayloft. And Connie was not a big girl. So when she got to the Hayloft and had a couple more drinks, she was pretty tipsy. And her date got up and went to the bathroom. And Connie said, "I can't do this." And got up and walked out of the Hayloft. And you can literally see video of Connie walking out of the Hayloft. She bumps the wall on her way out because she's intoxicated, and she's never seen again. And this happened about a week after Paige vanished. Again, if you look at Connie Royce and you look at Paige, they're very similar looking. So I have long thought that there could be a connection between those two cases, but really the only known connection is time. And I know that Connie's case was worked hard by the Macomb County Sheriff's Office. One of the lieutenants there really worked on Connie's case, and Connie's case is difficult. There's really no one to advocate for her. She was the much younger sister. I believe that her older sister was like in her 40s when Connie disappeared, in her 20s. So her parents are gone. Her older siblings are elderly and not able to be as active as they'd like in Connie's case.
I don't know if you saw my reaction. I did look up Connie Royce, and they could be sisters. They really could be sisters.
Yeah, they look a lot alike. Now, Mount Clemens is nowhere near Fowlerville. It's nowhere near Canton. But if you're looking for a woman who leaves her purse behind, Connie left her purse in the bar. And I believe she left her shoes too.
As far as Buster being an auxiliary police officer, did that keep him in one town? Was he connected to one town, or was it like a county?
So I don't know who he was working for as an auxiliary officer, so I can't say, was he an auxiliary Macomb County sheriff, which would have him going all over Macomb County, or if he was an auxiliary officer like up in Almont, what would bring him to Canton? I'm very curious about what had him in Canton, because Almont and Canton are several miles apart. We're talking 30, 35 miles. And back then, 1990, I think I-696 had opened. So there would have been a freeway, like a direct path via freeway. But if it wasn't open yet, I can't remember when 696 opened and connected the two freeways to make it easy for him to get to Canton.
Wow, Nina. Well, this has been an incredible conversation. We really appreciate you discussing these cases with us, and we hope there's a break in Paige's case. Yeah, definitely keep us updated, and you're certainly welcome to come back anytime you'd like to speak about these cases or any other case.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And where do you tell people to go if they have any information on Paige's disappearance?
If you have information on Paige's disappearance, you can contact the Livingston County Sheriff's Office. The tip line is 517-540-7880.